Welcome all to another Sitecore User Group France event. This is the second of this year, and the organizers for this event are Miguel Vinaldo. Unfortunately, he couldn't join us for today's session because of a family emergency, but he had done a lot for this event to be organized. And myself, Ramkumar Nambi. I'm working as a global architect like Miguel at Baltic. And we also have Edwin joining us, who's working as a lead Sitecore developer at Baltic. And warm welcome to the speakers. We have Sumit Upadhyay, who will be sharing with us how to deploy Solr search in Azure Kubernetes using Solr operator. We also have Jesper, who will be talking about Sitecore search in real use. Then we have Clisby, who will be going through content compliance. And finally, we have Kristoffer, who will be talking about generative AI in Sitecore Exemplar. It's going to be a 30-minute session each, and each of the sessions is going to be a really interesting one. Hope you're looking forward for it. And let's not waste any more time because we're already a bit delayed. So let me hand it over to Sumit to start with this session.
Yeah. I hope you're able to see the slides.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you, Ram and Sitecore User Group France for having me, and thank you all for joining. Just name the topic once more: deploying Solr with Solr operator in Azure Kubernetes. Let us quickly look at the agenda that we have for today. I'll quickly introduce myself, and then I'll talk a little bit about the search options. We'll focus our attention onto Solr deployment options after that, and then a little bit about Kubernetes and the Solr operator. And then after deep diving into Kubernetes and the terminologies associated with Solr operator, we are going to have a look at the advantages and the challenges that comes in play with Solr operator. I'll try to do the demo. Most probably it won't be possible, but I'll be able to show the scripts, the partial scripts, the YAML that I used for the deployment, in case I'm not able to show the demo itself. And then I'll share some resources which can be very useful for getting started with Solr operator. After that, we can have some Q&A if it's possible. Yeah, so let's get started. This is about me. I'm Sumit Upadhyay. I'm working as a software engineer at iQuality. I'm currently based out of Netherlands. I have more than 11 years of IT experience, mostly into Sitecore, .NET and Azure. I am Sitecore certified in Sitecore 8, 9, 10. And yes, when I'm not working, I like to travel and follow different sports. So these are the search options that I've listed. These are not the exhaustive list, of course, but these are the most widely used search options for Sitecore. Solr is kind of the default one or the de facto one. And also, when I say search options, I mean the search options that will be utilized in the front-end website, not the CM environment, because generally CM is like purely Solr. So yeah, Solr, and then Azure Search or Azure Cognitive Search. Azure Cognitive Search is kind of deprecated; it's not that much used. Then we have Coveo and SearchStack. These are mostly used for enterprise websites or like websites that have a lot of like multi-sites and like a lot of pages, a lot of content. Then these are good options to have. I've also listed Algolia, and the last option that I've listed is the Sitecore search itself. This is the latest product from Sitecore. It's a SaaS product. Although it's mostly used for XM Cloud, but I think even I think it might be supported for XM and XP as well. Yeah. Now we'll focus our attentions to the Solr deployment options. So earlier I was talking about the Solr options. Now we'll focus on only Solr. This was the architecture that was mostly used in Sitecore 6, 7, and even 8. It's kind of old. It's not that much used nowadays. Solr master slave. This is the setup where the read and write operation are getting split. So Solr master is responsible for writing, whereas the slaves are more for the reading part. As you can see in the architecture, the Solr master is connected with the CM, and then so whenever there's a change in CM, those get pushed to Solr master so that it's always updated. And the two slaves that I have here, they are constantly polling the Solr master. So whenever there's a change, it just polls, and then those changes are being copied over to slaves. Then the slaves in turn are being connected to the CD environments so that they can be used in the front end website. I have listed the two slaves over here, but they can be many depending on the need, how much you have data in your website. And the architecture itself is fairly easy, quick to set up, but the downside is it's kind of manual. So if you needed another slave, suppose like I have Solr slave 1 and Solr slave 2, if you needed one more, Solr slave 3, for example, then you have to provision another virtual machine and then configure everything yourself. And the simplicity of this architecture is the Solr master, Solr slave can reside in one VM, or they can be split up into multiple VMs, again, depending on the need. And it's not that much used widely because of the memory issues that we encounter. So, Solr master, Solr slave, whenever we are setting it up, we have to specify the memory that it will utilize upfront itself. So initially, maybe we can configure it to say 8 GB of RAM or 32 gigs of RAM, but then as more and more data gets pushed, they tend to fill in, and then we tend to have issues, and then we have to again scale it up ourselves. And the bigger problem, that is kind of a lesser problem, but the bigger problem with this approach is it's not compatible with the new versions of Solr. So that's a big downside to this approach. The next architecture that I've listed is the Solr Cloud, which actually uses Zookeeper. So now we do not have master and slave. So the read and write operations are kind of not split, but they are managed by Zookeeper over here. We have several nodes. I have just 3. It can be again many, depending on the need. The Zookeeper in turn is connected with all the CM as well as the CDs, and the Zookeeper is responsible for managing the Solr nodes. The Solr nodes, the data is getting pushed to all the nodes. It's kind of replication. So that's the reason why we have like very real-time search or high availability because of that, because the data is being pushed to each of the nodes, and then if one of them is not available or it's not working well, then also we will have data in the other two. So the Zookeeper is responsible for the coordination and then availability. If one is dying or one is not working well, it's responsible for setting up the new one. And this is about the Solr Cloud. The next option that I've listed is the managed Solr. I've listed just search stacks. Maybe Coveo is also an option for managed Solr. So over here, we do not have to set up anything ourselves. We just have to procure a subscription from search stacks, and they will ideally provide a URL which will have everything. So the overhead of setting up Solr, managing Solr, or any other search, it's just down to them, not us. But the downside again is it's kind of expensive, and for smaller websites, maybe 100 or 1,000 pages, it might not be the best option to go with it. So it's kind of expensive, but then the benefits is like everything is being done by another person or another party, and we just have to focus on the Sitecore itself or the front end website itself. This is the topic that I'm trying to focus on today, the Solr operator. So over here, we are getting the best of both worlds, the Solr Cloud as well as the Kubernetes. So there are advantages with Kubernetes as well as the advantages with Solr Cloud that we learned. It's highly available, real-time search. So we get the best of both the worlds. And later we'll see that the downsides also. The Solr operator is kind of the official way of managing the Apache Solr within Kubernetes. Solr operator is kind of a smart helper that makes it easier to manage and run Solr on the Kubernetes cluster. So suppose if I want to create a Solr cloud instance in Kubernetes, I don't have to, like earlier when we were seeing the Solr cloud setup, it was manual and kind of complicated also because we need to set up Zookeeper ourselves, we need to set up Solr ourselves, and it's kind of a tedious task. But with Solr Operator, it's like just using 4 or 5 commands. I'll show it in the demo, and we are basically good to go. Yeah. So it basically automates the setup and the management of the Solr cloud cluster. And yes, this is also something that I've learned the hard way. The Solr cloud runs on the Linux nodes and not on the Windows nodes. And it's declarative deployment, so infrastructure as code, the repeatability advantage that we have with Solr Operator. So suppose you have one instance of Solr Operator, again, for deploying another one, it's kind of very, very easy. And like I mentioned, the advantages of Kubernetes, we get that with Solr Operator. So it's self-healing and easily scalable. We'll talk more about it in the advantages section. Now a little bit on the Kubernetes itself. Kubernetes, now the landscape of web application deployment and configuration is kind of changing. Like earlier, when we were, even now for some, for most applications, but now it's kind of changing, shifting towards container deployment and Kubernetes. So earlier, what we used to do is like we'll have a virtual machine or an app service where we just push our code base configs and the DLLs for that matter. But now what we are doing is we are packaging it into containers, and then we are deploying the containers in an Azure Kubernetes, Azure Container Registry, and then those are being used in the Kubernetes for deployment. So Kubernetes is responsible for the orchestration of those containers. Yeah, it's an open source platform. It is designed to automate deployment and then scaling and then operating application containers. Yeah, these applications inside Kubernetes are called as services, and within themselves they are like easily discoverable. They are not visible to the outside world or not connected to the internet as such. So that's why the service discovery is kind of a big advantage with Kubernetes. It also has load balancer within itself. Then when we have to deploy another instance, or even if we want to do rollback, it's kind of easier with Kubernetes. One of the biggest advantages of Kubernetes is the self-healing part, where like if something we'll have different replicas of the application, and if one goes down, the other one instantly comes up. Yeah. Go to the next one. Now, these are the terminologies associated with Kubernetes. I have not listed all of them. I've just focused on the terminologies that are associated with Solr Operator. So over here, I've listed the CRDs, or custom resource definitions, Helm and Helm charts. These I can explain them together. Helm, an analogy if I have to give, it's like very similar to NuGet package manager. Like if I wanted to use Newtonsoft JSON, for example, in my Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, I don't need to refer the DLL of the Newtonsoft directly. What I'll do is in the Visual Studio IDE, I'll just open the NuGet package manager console or the search console inside NuGet package manager, and I'll just search for Newtonsoft JSON, and then I'll refer it, associate it with my repository, and then start working with it. Similarly, what we have is in the Kubernetes world, Kubernetes is kind of an open platform where like it's very open to changes, and Helm enables that one. So like for Solr Operator, deploying Solr Operator or Solr, Apache has already created the package for that. So we don't have to define the package once more. They have just created the package, and that package is available in Helm, and that package is actually called as a Helm chart. So Solr operator is the Helm chart, and then that package, this Solr operator package, is available inside Helm. And then this package has some custom resource definitions, which will be utilized for the deployment, for the setting up of the Solr operator. So those are called as custom resource definitions. And like earlier, I was mentioning about the services inside Kubernetes not having access to internet. To gain that access or to overcome this issue, we have something called ingress or ingress controller. Ingress controller is kind of the application gateway that allows the services within the Kubernetes to talk to the outside world. kubectl or kubectl is the CLI that will be used to run the commands against our clusters. Then what are the advantages of Solr operator? Yeah, like I mentioned, the advantages of Solr operator is kind of tied to the Kubernetes. It's really easy to manage. It enables the automation of the setup and the management of the Solr Cloud clusters within the Kubernetes. It simplifies administration and then also reduces the potential configuration errors. Then scalability and elasticity. It's really easy to scale. When I'm defining the Solr operator, I'll be able to define how many replicas I want. So if I want to scale it down, I can just change that number. So initially, maybe I have 5. I can change it to 3 or maybe 7, depending on the need again. So it's really easy to scale up or scale down. And fault tolerance and higher availability. Since it is Solr Cloud and then the data is being replicated into multiple Solr nodes, so that's why it's kind of highly available and yes, immune to like it's able to, like, if one of the pods or the nodes are getting down, the other one is being there to handle the load. Then upgrading Solr Cloud is also fairly easy compared to the standard setup, because when we are defining the Solr instance within the Solr operator, we will be able to define the version that we want. So yes, the upgrade part is also fairly easy compared to the standard one, the Kubernetes one. Now for the challenges, again, when I talked about the advantages, the challenges are also tied with the Kubernetes part. So since we are like more into virtual machines and app service, and I think we are just getting started with Kubernetes. So changing the mindset and then working with the Kubernetes way of working is kind of new to us. So the learning curve and then the complexity, it's kind of steep. So it takes time to understand the overall like deployment part and then how it goes. And also like in virtual machines, when if there's anything going wrong, you can just hop into the server and then check the log and everything. But with Kubernetes, it's kind of it's a new way of working, so yeah, it is challenging. And then there are alternatives. Solr operator is like one of the ways of deploying Solr, but then there are other alternatives like Surstack, or for that matter, the Solr Cloud itself. Like if you already have deployed multiple Solr Cloud instances, like manual one, then you already tend to know the pros and cons and then the puddles that can come in. So that can be a viable option. And like I mentioned when I was talking about Surstack and then Coveo, if you have like a very big website or a lot of websites in one Sitecore instance, then it might be better to go with Surstack. And the biggest downside with Solr operator, which I feel, is if you do not have your Sitecore instance in Kubernetes, then just having Solr operator for the Solr part or the search part might not be a good match. So if you have your Sitecore instance within Kubernetes, then it is like a good marriage in a way. It's a good combination to have with Solr also in Solr Kubernetes. Yeah, for the demo, I just wanted to show the code that I used for the deployment. Yeah, this is the repository that I'm working with, and this one uh, I already have published to my GitHub. I'll share the link in the resources. So just let's have a look at the code. Inside Azure, I have the ARM templates, which will be used for the deployment part. So these files, the JSONs that you see over here, are actually the ARM templates. And then inside the Solr operator node, I have these three YAMLs, which I'll talk more about. And then these are the PowerShell scripts. So initially, what I'm doing is I'm just the AZ login command. I'm just trying to use to log into my Azure portal subscription, and then I'm using this deploy registry to deploy Azure container registry. For this example, maybe it's not a good thing to talk about, but I just wanted to have everything together, so that's why I have this. Yeah, so deploy registry, I don't think we should focus that much. The next part is deploying the Azure Kubernetes cluster itself, which I'm using. This is the script, and then in the script, if I open, these are the parameters that I'm taking. One is the env. Basically, over here, like you can see, we have the non-PRD and then the PRD. These are actually mostly the same. It's just I'm using different options for the VM or the virtual machine scale sets size. So for PRD, I'm just using a higher value. That's it. Otherwise, there's not much difference. Yeah. And then I'm using a prefix, which I'm taking from the user. Over here, I've defined the default values for these. So if the user doesn't provide this, then it will be SUG and then -env, so SUG PRD. Then the resource group name, then the location, and then the ACR name. I'm taking the ACR name also as a parameter because towards the end, I'm just attaching the ACR, the Azure Container Registry, to my Azure Kubernetes cluster. And if I go to the script itself, so these are the parameters, and then I'm just outputting these values in the console so that it is easy for a user to understand, like, these are the values that will be utilized for the deployment. And then this is the command for just deploying the resource group in the location, $location, and then this command will be utilized for deploying the cluster itself. Now, the cluster, like, based on the environment name, it will refer to the Azure deploy parameters, then either PRD or non-PRD JSON. And yeah, then it's good to open the Azure deploy JSON. So this is the ARM template for deploying the Azure Kubernetes cluster. And again, over here, I'm just defining some parameters and then defining some default values as well. These are the VM size system, and then this one is the VM size Windows. For this example, I'm also deploying a Windows node because I wanted to populate the index, and I also wanted to use the Sitecore image for that one. So that's why I had to deploy the Windows node. Otherwise, for this one, it's actually not used. The options or the values are pretty standard. I think it's good to show, this one. So this is the values that will be utilized for deploying the node, the system node. The OS type is Linux. So this is the system node that will be deployed. I'm just specifying a few values, like the hard disk will be 128 gigs, and then the count, I'm just defining it as 1. And then I'm defining another OS. which I'm just calling it as Linux. Maybe I should have called it a Solr. So the Solr or the Solr operator will actually reside in this one and not on the Linux one. And this Windows node that I'm creating is basically used for the populating of the indexes once the Solr is deployed. Yeah. So once this one is done, these two commands I'm just using to update my kubeconfig so that I can have the SUG AKS over here in the extension. And then, like I mentioned, with this deployment, it's like just this command, and then like just 4 or 5 lines of command, and then that's it. We are basically done with the deployment. So to talk about the deployment itself, so over here, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to add the Helm repository in my local. So I'm just trying to add the Helm chart in my local, and then once we do that, we need to update it with the latest. So these two commands are used for that. Then I'm just trying to create the Solr and Solr operator chart using this one. If I open this link, we will see that there are several options. One with all with dependencies, then like all with then all, and then so there are several options, but I've just chosen this one as the default one. And if I go one step back, we can see you should be able to see different versions of Solr operator. Actually on this one. So now we can see that there are two versions of Solr operator, but I've just used 0.71. So the latest one is actually 0.80, and actually there's a version matrix with this one. Should be here. Yes. So based on the Kubernetes version, we have to select Solr operator version. So if I'm using 0.7x, then I need to use 1.21 or higher. I cannot be lower than this one. And also there's a connection between the Solr version. So if I'm using 0.7x, I need to use I think supported from 7.7. So it cannot be lower than 7.7. And if I'm using 0.8x, then I cannot deploy. It has to be higher. It has to be either 8.11 or higher than that. Yeah, this is the version matrix between the Solr operator and Kubernetes and Solr operator and the Solr version. So once we do this, we need to get the custom resource definitions using this command. And after that, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create a namespace. So the Solr operator will be actually deployed to this namespace. And once this namespace is created, I'm trying to install the Solr operator inside this namespace. So this one is just specifically for Solr operator, and then in the next line, I'm trying to create a namespace for Solr. So the Solr will actually reside in the Solr namespace. And yes, the last command is actually for the populating of the indexes. Yeah, I'm using these YAMLs, these 3 YAMLs. So the Solr operator values, it's actually fairly simple. It's just to specify that it should deploy in the Linux node and not on the Windows node. Since I have Windows and Linux, so I'm just telling the Kubernetes to install it on the Linux node and not on the Windows. Otherwise, it's empty. And for the Solr cloud values, I'm specifying the Solr version and specifying the replicas, and then I'm specifying the ingress controller, the local domain. But I do not have certificates. And again, I'm specifying that the Solr cloud should be deployed on the Linux node and also on the user one. So it shouldn't be deployed on the system one. Since we have like 2 nodes, one for the system and the other for the we actually have 3 nodes, one for the Windows and then 2 Linux. One of them is for the system. So over here, I'm specifying, please do not deploy on the system one, deploy on the other one, the user one. And the Zookeeper also, I'm trying to deploy on the user one. And Solr init is actually used for the deployment or the populating of the indexes. So I'm trying to use the Sitecore image for this. And then I'm specifying the Solr connection string over here. And then I'm specifying the port prefix name. So I've just specified SUG. So my indexes will be called as SUG underscore core index, SUG underscore master index, like that. Yeah, and this is a job. It's not. Yeah, and if I go to this one quickly, we'll see that in the namespace of Solr, we will have, yeah, since I've specified 3, so I have 3 Solr clouds and then 3 Zookeepers. And I could access I've already deployed it, so I could access using the port forward from the Visual Studio Code extension. So if I just do this one, I've already done this, so I do not need to do this again. So I have it running already. Yeah, and these are the 3 indexes that are listed, and then these are the core. For the core, I just see 1. Ideally, it should be 3. And then in the cloud, we'll be able to see that there are 3 replicas of the Solr cloud running in local. I think I should go back to the slides. And these are the resources that are listed. I've actually already opened them in my browser. So yeah, these are just the resources that I found useful when I was trying to set up or configure Solr Operator. This is the GitHub from Solr Operator, and it has a lot of good documentation around it. Pretty easy to get started. This is the version matrix that I've already showed, and then this is the Solr Operator website itself. We have tutorials over here, and then a little bit about Helm charts, some videos as well. And yeah, this is the link from, this is a blog from Jeremy Davis, who's quite popular in the Sitecore world, and he's trying to set up in his local machine. So in his Linux node, like local Docker desktop, Linux containers, he's written a great blog for getting started in local. And then the document that I was showing, this I've published in my repository, so it's available. Yeah. This is it for me actually. Do you have any questions or remarks?
Nice. Let's see with the live stream if the viewers have any question. So as live stream is a bit delayed, let's give a few seconds. Cool. I think no questions, Sumit. Thank you. That was a great presentation. Now let's switch to next one from Jesper. If you're ready, the stage is yours.
Yes, I hope you see my screen. I will talk a bit about Sitecore Search. Just let's start with a brief intro. What the engagement console is, the control panel for Sitecore Search, a bit of how it's getting started, how we get content into Sitecore Search, and a bit about this SDK from Sitecore Search that help you build the actual search experiences. I have put screenshots in my presentation, so hopefully we'll make all of it. Let's see afterwards if we have time to also do into the actual product. Search is always important on nearly every website since we started using Sitecore. Sumit mentioned several of those, so no real need to dig into this. We had Sitecore content search available for a long time. That makes it really simple to use search, even with different providers. We had Solr, we had Azure Search as an option, and back in the days we also had Lucene. And then we have the search stacks as a SaaS solution, and Coveo also have a very nicely integrated solution. On the other hand, there are some external search providers that are crawling the website, and hereby it solves the problem that we often compose our websites with content from different parts of the Sitecore content tree. I see a lot of Pluto solutions. If you have some years back in the space, you probably also met a forward search, DT search, Algorithm back in the days, and yeah, Algorithm is also one here. So let's skip about that. Sitecore Search, it's a new SaaS product from Sitecore. It is a completely independent product, a component that fits into this composable stack. So you can use it with XM Cloud, yes. You can use it if you're building with Sitecore GSS, still headless, even though it's not on Sitecore's infrastructure. Or you can use it on your traditional XM XP solution, or even if you have a website built on something completely different technology. It's actually not important for Sitecore Search. It supports both crawling the website, and it can do some indexing of items, and I have examples of both ways to solve this. Yeah. The customer engagement console, cc.sitecorecloud.io, that is where you control the Sitecore search experience. It's not integrated into the Sitecore XM Cloud, or like you know with content search. It is on its own site. And there's a lot of configuration here. Before, I think I skipped, you can configure each different search experience with rules, how to boost and bury or even blacklist items, stuff that we previously had to do mostly in code. That's exposed for the editors or users. It is built up by widgets, which are those. Here is some content from Sitecore Search, and each widget can be configured with different of those rules. So whenever you're interacting with Sitecore Search, you actually say, I'm this specific widget. Give me the rules for this widget and the results that comply with that. Sorry?
Jesper, I think you're sharing your wrong screen. We are seeing your Outlook.
Oh, thank you. Did you see this? The engagement console. Thank you for noticing. The engagement console with the rules and the widget configure or list here. I have two widgets that can be across all pages, product list and preview search, and I have some specific pages configured. And that can be rules both for a widget and for a page. To getting started, this is the process in the Sitecore Search documentation. Seems very simple, right? You just do some planning, do some configuration, integrate it, test and validate, and maybe you will take another round of this. But what is it in reality? It is a good idea to actually do some planning upfront. You'll need some content searches where to actually get your content. It can be multiple sources, and I think all of the solutions I've been involved in, we actually end up with having multiple sources. You also need to figure out the attributes that are necessary for the actual users, the visitors on the website, and attributes necessary for any of your business rules, filters, facets, sorting, or any of this. It's called textual context when Sitecore Search should figure out what we really mean. Then there's a step of preparing those sources, your data must be available. So if it seems simple, we just want to crawl the website, but often we also have some additional data that we would need, for instance, for faceting or filtering or sorting or stuff like that. You need to make that available. For instance, adding meta tags on the site or something like that, that you can configure Sitecore Search to find. And then you can do the actual configuration in Sitecore Search. You create attributes in schema, configure which features you're going to use, configure the sources, how to find the content, and then you can run indexing, test, verify that you have your content available. And then you can do the actual integration, add it to the website, build the actual UI that the users will see, maybe some custom renderings, maybe use the SDK, probably some customizations to it. And here in Europe, we always need to take care of translations. You probably need to do some adjustments for the styling also. That was a lot about attributes. And yes, it was really much simpler when we had Solr. We had those dynamic fields. In Sitecore Search, we had to configure each and every attribute. There's a long list of default attributes, and you can easily add more. For each attribute, configure name, display name, if it's required, different data types, also arrays of strings and integers, and there are a pretty extensive list of this. And then you can see here how do you want to use this attribute, and even afterwards you configure which features should be available. Should this specific attribute be available for facets or for filtering, for personalization? And that needs to be configured before that option is available. And you need to, when you have done the changes, you always need to publish that schema, and the content is re-indexed with the new rules. Then you'll add some actual content. Yeah, it's from a source or a connector. Name description is pretty obvious. There are a few important here. API crawler, web crawler is the common one. There's a web crawler advanced just below here. And there is API push, where you can push content directly to Sitecore Search without that calling anything. I've not used API push. There's a feed crawler, that's a specialized one to use RSS feeds. We have used the web crawler, advanced web crawler a lot, and especially because we always have sitemap on the site anyway, so it's very, very simple to say we have triggers, start on the sitemap, and Sitecore Search can take care of that. You can configure if it's a sitemap index or if it's a specific sitemap file. So you can also have an index with public pages and an index with hidden secret pages or anything you would need like that. When you have this trigger configured, then you configure the extractor. That is how to actually get the content from those pages. The trigger handles requesting sitemap, requesting sitemap index, requesting the actual sitemaps, and requesting the URLs in this sitemap. So for each page, you then configure what are the data we need to extract from this page. For a website, it can be either using an XPath like structure. It's the one you can see here. You can also use JavaScript in it, and there's a CSS selector that you find that's simple. So here, description, we'll take that from the meta description field that we had on the page for anyway. And here it's important to have this content available, as I mentioned. We have a lot of changes or renderings on our Next.js. In Next.js, it's simple. We have the renderings here. It's a product main image that renders an image on the site, but it's also using the next head component to add some additional properties to the head section, meta text, that we can use for indexing. For instance, the product ID is a very important procedure. And then you need to verify the changes. It has become a lot easier. Every time you have made some changes to the attributes or to the configuration for the schema, you are asked to publish those changes, and do you want to re-index? The changes are not available before it's been re-indexed, so recrawled. No surprise by that. And you can now see on the list of sources what is the current state. Is a re-index awaiting? Is it currently re-indexing? What is the state? What is the number of items? And if there are errors, it is shown on the actual source. You can see here that it's saying there are two configuration errors, and you can click view source and you'll get the actual error description. Could be there was something wrong with the URLs, or a required attribute was not found, or also if no documents was actually found with this configuration you have, then it will also give an error saying, oh, there's something wrong here. We didn't get an error, but we didn't get any documents, so it's not really working. When I first started try search a year ago, it was really hard to see what was going on because there's a delay from you have made a change to that change is published and the content is scanned, and then you are able to see it. But it's become much better now. You can see that there's this exclamation mark saying something is going on right now. You can see that it's not being re-indexed yet, and during the re-indexing, you can see it. A rescan, I think, is the right terminology from Sitecore Search. Search is actually used in a lot of places on several websites. Here we are using it for a list of distributors, list of employees, a product list. We'll see that in a moment, where an editor can pick some specific products, and we also have the usual search results page. So when you are talking Sitecore Search, it makes sense. You can get a lot of benefit by actually thinking a bit more than just the search results in the item. I don't think it's that much different than what we have from Sitecore Content Search, but still be aware of that, especially when trying to plan which features and attributes you actually need. This search result page here is just generated with the SDK, Sitecore Search SDK, that's been released recently. There's a CLI. You start, say now I need to have a component generated, and it will help you. Questions like this: do you want to use JavaScript? Do you want to use TypeScript? How do you want to have your styling? Should it be using a style component? Should it be CSS modules? Should it be old school CSS independent files? Or don't you want any styling at all? There are several components to choose to have generated, 8 I think, and there is this the URL that's shown here. It's actually a storybook site that the Sitecore Search team is providing, where you can see the actual components, how they interact, and how you can configure them. And when you run this CLI, you'll get a long file generated. Here, this is from the previous search. Not search results. Previous search is the one where just the text field where you can get the term suggestions and the first results. Yeah, and it is a long file, but it's done okay that there are some components that are reused. But I must say, when I created a few components of this, my Solr cube immediately gave errors that there was a lot of duplicated code. So in the components that are passed that are very similar, that can be moved together. But you get a source file, that you actually have the option to customize and have that experience that you really want to leave for your experience. One thing I was really hit by is that those switches only work client-side. I had this very strange error about a dispatch function that was missing, that I really was struggling with figuring out what was going on. It cannot be those React components from the SDK, UI SDK, cannot be server-side rendered with Next.js. We have made a small, I don't know if it's a hack or fix for this, to ensure that it's just rendered client-side with this effect in Next.js. I think it's something with the search, how this search provider is configured and the hooks are interacting with each other. So at least it makes sense to have those components running client-side, because then it's the actual users that are making the requests to search service, and hereby you can get the benefits of the personalization stuff and all that are available inside the search. So it's okay for this scenario for us. We were just not aware of it. Yeah, and this rendering is just out of the box. I had to add this theme in the search provider, widgets provider from Sitecore Search to have it look usable. But from there, it was actually very straightforward to have this search results page generated. But there's no images, but otherwise that would be included in the list here. And there are a few other options. Renderings with cards and rows and easily add your own. That's for the search results page. We also use Sitecore Search as a kind of composable glue, I call it. We have a website with products, and those products are actually coming from another API. They are not in XML. In XML, there is just a page saying here is a product page, and this is the product ID. And then we collect the updated information from the underlying APIs. I think that is not that strange in composable world. But we also wanted that the editor I want to be able to insert a product list with some specific products, some other place on the website, as we often did in our traditional implementations. With the new solution, we would really, our new composable headless solution, we would really try to not copy all or replicate, synchronize all of those product data into Sitecore. And Sitecore Search helped us with this. So we still just have a product list in Sitecore where the editor can choose the products. It's the product pages where there's a product ID reference. And in Sitecore Search, it is a pure SaaS solution. That is a nice API that you can use. And in the console, there's also this API builder in the developer section that can help you build up requests. You can choose on the left side which limit the number of items you want to see, paging, query, keywords, facets, and you also specify this context. Help build up your request, and you can test it here without thinking about the authentication and stuff like that. Easily in the console, Sitecore engagement console, the browser. Just hit run, you can make changes to the request and hit run, and then end up with having to say, okay, this is the request I want to execute. And then it's just a matter of usual API integration in the Next.js. It's a fetch to this place, search and render it. And that kind of integration, that can also be server-side rendered. You need to take care of the token. There's a authentication endpoint. You call with an API to get a video token, and then call the Sitecore search, get the data, and can visual side completely in control as you see in other things. It could be even more controlled by Sitecore search. Sitecore search also have another paradigm here. Say what we really want is on those pages is to show the relevant products to the user, and we have been used to that's something the editor configure on the pages. Saying, okay, now I've built an article about something here, and it makes sense to then mention those relevant products. But Sitecore search also have this personalization dimension. You can trigger events when the visitor is visiting specific pages, and hereby Sitecore can help Sitecore search can help recommend specific products. Maybe that's actually what should be used even more here. Or we could have specific widgets on the pages, different widget IDs, and in Sitecore search configure saying, okay, when you are on that page on this specific widget, then we want to boost those specific products, but maybe the personalization engine can do something even better. We have not explored that a lot yet, but I definitely see the potential in Sitecore search for this. But it also means that we should consider the Sitecore engagement console not just as a developer tool, but it's also something that the users, the business users that are building out the website needs to be aware of using and be able to configure if they want to do that. So then we also have something that are not pages that we still want to edit or show on the website. Here, this is a list of APIs. We have also used this for a list of distributors and similar, where the editors are actually creating all the content in Sitecore. It just doesn't have its own page. It's used as part of other pages. So here for the employees on all pages, where there's a contact who is the responsible person for this website. You can contact them, and then reference a specific employee. To solve that, we have the GraphQL endpoints available. This is not XM Cloud. It's a CSS site that's using for this specific website. But still, we have the GraphQL endpoint available. So we could build up a query saying, okay, now we want all of those items placed on a specific path, based on a specific template, in a specific language, and get those items as JSON from this response. We have an API key for authentication. And then in Sitecore search, we can use this API call. It is actually straightforward. We configure the URL to the GraphQL endpoint, including the API key. The GraphQL query the trigger type is a request. So the specific URL, we add the content type and the GraphQL query. We have to send it as JSON. In other places, we could add another header. It's GraphQL because I think it is called, and post the content as the indented feels similar to the playground we saw before. We haven't had success with that. I'm not saying it's not possible, but we didn't make there, and we could easily do it just convert it to a JSON query, a JSON request where you have the query property with full GraphQL query from episode 4, and also variables if you want to use it. And then the document extractor. Before we saw it was an XPath as we were using. Now we are using JavaScript. You can also use JavaScript on pages if you want to do something special make an array collection of some items collected on the pages or change values or whatever you need. But you have to decide on the document level, saying, would we use the JavaScript method or the XPath method to extract the content from this document. So here it's pretty straightforward. We get an array of data response results. Is an array of the items we want to index. We take the properties. This one is a bit naive. One of the errors we had was that was not selected an item for this department field, and then this JavaScript gives an error. Could guess there's potential non-reference error here, so we need to take care of that. It's just in JavaScript. It just complicates this snippet a bit. I'm sure you won't be able to make that. UL is required. There are some attributes that are required, and if that attribute is not set, then the document is not indexed. It was also one of the very first things we were struggling with, the default document extractors using the OG OpenGraph type fields to set document type. We didn't have that on the website in the initial implementation, and then the documents are not indexed. You can solve that easily by having a fallback to a fixed value that is completely supported in the UI. But you need to be aware of that. There are some attributes that are required, and a value is necessary for those employees who just add in or not writing a specific URL. Yes. That's the employees. We get them indexed in another source. Then on the website, we actually just have used a slightly modified component to show this. It was this is from a version before. That was real styling on it. You can probably abstract from that. We wanted or needed a drop down to be able to select a department. We have department in index, as you saw, and we have a facet for department. So out of the box, we would with the search results page, as you probably saw in the beginning, there is a accordion with drop downs to the left. So we have only customized this to have a drop down for this specific facet. And then we are just reusing the UI component that we have generated by the CLI from the SDK. Yeah, only we have made a slightly different view for those items to render the email and phone number and not make a link to this fixed URL. Learnings so far. Sitecore Search can solve a lot of scenarios. I hope I've given the impression of that. Know your schema, such as required attributes. If you skip that, you might get into challenges that can at least be annoying when you're trying to get used to this. You should really consider the project timeline for this, as search is indexing content either from the website or through an API. It means that the content is really needed before you really can test your solutions. So there are no facets of this, there are items with values. And at least we often experience that content is postponed a bit in the project timeline. And that can actually feedback to say, okay, it's hard to really complete those search solutions until you have the real content for candidates and content, but it is a bit hard. So the components generated by the SDK, it is a very good starting point, but also consider it as a starting point. Just make the changes that you need your solution or however you want that. We have made a Sitecore component where you can choose which paths do you want to show, and just have some checks in those switches when it should be shown. Consider that. And there is much more in the product. Personalization analytics. Maybe the time allows us to take a quick look in the engagement console. There's actually the intention to be able to have a lot of, you can see when the users are interacting with the website, the visits, which items are the most popular or has the highest click-through rate, or what you can say, and be able to prioritize that. It will also collect the search terms you're using, so you're able to optimize your content for that. We have not explored that at all yet, but there's definitely a huge part of the product available there also that can be beneficial for the customers, for the clients. Just a small note: watch out for permissions. To be able to see this attribute schema and configure those things about design, you need to have a role called tech admin. So you can I've got access to, I think, 3-4 Sitecore search solutions for new sites using Sitecore search, and at least 2 of them I got the administrator, but not tech admin. So you get access, if you can see users, you can see your administrator, but you are really missing this very important attribute access. Where is it really I configure the important parts for this? For that, you need to be a tech admin. And it's not been a problem, it's just an additional, we need to reach out to have the right access for that. So if you ever see domain settings missing, that's probably the reason. So, on our new solutions. I don't know if there are any questions where you'd like to have a chance to answer now. Otherwise, I'll say there's actually quite good documentation from Sitecore on this search-specific documentation site. And there is a very nice walkthrough. Rob has made several videos where he goes through different parts of Sitecore search. So I'll definitely recommend that. There'll be a chance to go much deeper than we have done here. And yeah, use the Sitecore community Slack. I had several, as you saw, issues. Hopefully you'll not know that there's a solution for that, so you don't fall into the same hole. But at least I have written on the Sitecore community Slack, I have this problem. Was anyone have an idea? And I've got very good help, and the product team is very active within the Sitecore Slack. So just make sure to reach out and try to again.
Whole app if using CDP and personalized, or are they integrated out of the box? This is a question from Peter.
Yeah, and it's a good question. So it is completely disconnected, also as far as I have seen. And we have the same discussion regarding Sitecore Send that also have its own analytics and personalization available, where it also needs the user's interactions available. I think it's the intention that Sitecore Connect should be able to handle this. So whenever there is a visitor, it can push that data to the integrated products. It's not something I have tried. So yeah, we have all of the scripts on the site for this. Yeah, I think it's the good and the bad path of the composable experience.
Cool. That was an interesting session, Jesper. Thank you so much for presenting to Sitecore. And now let's switch to the third session from Peter Clisby. Thank you. Peter, are you ready to
I'm ready.
take the
Yeah,
stage?
thanks. Yeah, thanks, Jesper, and thanks, Ram, and then also thanks to Cycle User Group France for having me. So I've got a couple of slides, and I'm going to go pretty much 100% demo. So what could go wrong? So my talk is about Content Hub compliance and giving a bit of a deep dive on user group policies in Content Hub. My name is Peter Clisby, and I'm a Sitecore Content Hub architect at Solr. And so, without any further delay, I should go straight into it. So, I'm going to focus to that. There's many different aspects of Content Hub and several different modules, as you can see on the right-hand side here, with sort of DAM, CMP, MRM, PCM, and web to print. But I'm going to focus today largely on DAM in the interest of time, because it's quite a big topic. So you can see on the left-hand side here the kind of pages and lifecycle statuses. So there's the create page, the review page, asset search page, archived assets, and collections. And 4 of those are related to the lifecycle statuses. So the create page shows assets that are in the end final lifecycle status created, and then the same for some of the other lifecycle statuses and pages. Obviously, archived assets, reviewed, or under review on the review page. So in the centre, you can kind of see the privileges, and I should hopefully that's visible, but various different things which we'll look at when I go into the demo. You can also see down the bottom where we've got rules and an example of a rule where you can configure using these checkboxes various things. And then just here on the right, you can see the rules for MASIT. But without any further delay, I'm going to go straight into demo. So what I'm going to start by doing is just give a quick overview for people not familiar with Content Hub. So you'll be able to see the types of sort of functionality that we're going to enable users to have by user group policies. So my beautifully crafted list here, you can see a few things. So if I move that over to the right side here, you can see, so comments is super straightforward. It's just the ability to comment on the assets. And so something that's worth bearing in mind is that the comments are enabled on the everyone user group. So essentially, if you have a requirement to say we want to restrict people making comments, everyone can make a comment, and you'd have to update the out of the box everyone user in order to remove that. So as well as that, we've got the different pages that I've mentioned previously, and bear in mind this is a sort of demo sandbox, so lots of things on here that kind of for example purposes, but the main out of the box pages are your create page, which is going to be things that are in the created lifecycle and also enable you to create new assets. So if I just click through to the create page, you can see here I'm able to upload files, and essentially if I go and do any example, I will upload here. So that's hopefully quite clear. We've then got the other pages. So the review page, if I submit that created asset for approval, then it will go through to the review page, and a user that's got permissions to approve that asset will then review it. And then the asset search page will be approved assets. So if you think about that, you've got someone who can't approve the assets, creating them on the create page. You've then got someone who can approve those assets on the review page, and then once they've approved them, they will show on the asset search page and we're looking here at approved assets. So as well as that, we've got various functionality. So for example, you can download assets in bulk. If I click here, you can go through and you'll see my order here. So if I just go to this download, hopefully that's quite straightforward. And then you can go and download that as a zip file. And then as well as that, we've got actually going through to the asset detail page. You can download not just the original asset. So if I wanted to download it here, as a sort of straightforward example, but then also you've got various renditions. So you can see on the left-hand side here where we've got, the original, a PDF version. So if I download like to restrict that. Additionally, we've got lots of rich features like export to Excel. So you can see, I think, someone here where I can export those assets to an Excel file. Additionally, we've got mass edit capabilities. So, for example, mass edit in a table, which is a really powerful feature, where you can kind of go in and be kind of editing those assets en masse and then saving them en masse as well. And then additionally to that, if we go back, we've also just got the mass edit capability. So if I go edit, you'll see that come through to the mass edit page. So refresh renditions, if you think about what we've just looked at with the renditions that are on assets, it may be that you've got a new sort of media processing flow, or it may be that some of the renditions failed for whatever reason, and you're able to refresh renditions. And that's something also we might want to restrict, because if people don't know what they're doing with that and they're kind of doing that en masse, there can be a significant performance impact on the DAM if you're doing that for sort of tens of thousands of assets at the same time. So we've also got the concept of creating user renditions. So if I go through to any asset, then I'm able to create a rendition here, and I can kind of do whatever I want with that. I can change the resolution, resize it, crop it, change the format, various other things, and we may or may not allow a given user to do that. Then furthermore, a key sort of concept in Content Hub is creating public links. So essentially to expose that content to public users, you need a link that is public. You're able to configure that for a kind of vanity URL if you want, or you can leave the auto-generated. Then we've also got viewing public links. So there may be a concept where you don't want to allow someone to create a public link, but you might want them to be able to view the public links. And in which case, whilst they're not able to create them, if, for example, that asset doesn't have any public links, that does enable them to go and view the links. So if they need to share them with people, they've got that access. So what else have we got? So public links, share via email.
is a feature. So if we share via email, I can email that asset to any person. Then collections is a big concept, and we'll come back to collections in a minute. But ultimately, we're sort of creating collections that can be sort of made public. We can also share those with given users and various other things. And we'll look at that in particular because ultimately there's an out-of-the-box concept that if you want to override, you need to go and kind of change the out-of-the-box behavior where it manages those with out-of-the-box roles. But as I say, we'll come back to that. The concept of archiving. So you may not want basic users to have that power if for example, they are, simply creating assets and other people need to approve them. You wouldn't want them being able to mistakenly go and archive all of the approved public assets. And the same with delete. And you're able to configure those various options based on the life cycle. So, for example, you may say to someone, I'm happy for you to delete from the create page. You can also restrict that to assets that have only been created by that user. So you could essentially be saying to someone on the create page, in the created life cycle, I'm happy for you to delete your own assets. If you've uploaded something by mistake, that's fine. But you may say, I don't want you to delete other people's assets. And in the same way, it may be that you're saying to a given user group, I'm happy for you to delete any assets in the creative life cycle. But once they're in review or once they're approved, you may say, I don't want this person or this user type, user group to be able to delete them. You've then got metadata. So if we go through to any of the assets, you've got various sort of metadata on the asset. So all of this data, you can either give someone read permissions to that, or you can enable them to edit if appropriate. You've then also got things like view the file history and view the data history. So if we maximize this for a second, you can see here I've got the history here, and if I go here, I can see the file history, which just doesn't have any history anyway. So from that, there's also the concept of watermarking. So you'll see that subsequently when we look at that, but ultimately there's a concept where for given users, we sometimes might enforce that they have a watermark. So, if they download the asset, you can see here it's got the name of the user, Test Sug France A, and the time. So at least if they are downloading assets inappropriately and you don't want them to have that ability to distribute them, then you're able to watermark that asset, and at least it kind of clearly shows where that's come from. And then additionally to that, you're able to give users permission to view assets and download assets without that watermark. Okay, so download options. I think we sort of touched on that previously, but if we're looking at the sort of original, medium, custom, you can restrict those options so that potentially users can only download, for example, the preview or whatever you want to configure that for. And then we've also got M file versus M asset. There is the concept of the file behind and then the asset in Content Hub. I've touched previously on the created by current user, where I mentioned about the create page. You may say to someone, I'm happy for you to delete your own assets, but not someone else's. Then we've also got create draft. So from Content Hub, you're able to go to any asset. If it's in the approved state, you can create a draft of that if you want to make changes, which then goes back into a a previous life cycle. And then that ultimately enables you to kind of make changes to the sort of the data without then immediately propagating that on the approved asset. And creating the draft will actually lock that asset. So that then leads into this concept of sort of unlocking assets, where I've just created this software demo voice my bot. I've created a draft for this asset, and I'm able to, with my super user, I'm able to delete the draft, which will unlock it, or I'm also able to go by the manage page and look at locked assets, and from there I can unlock that asset. So those two concepts are related, the kind of draft and unlock, and feeding into the locked assets page. So we've getting close to the end of the sort of basic DAM functionality. We've also got the concept of a direct link and also direct publish. So if you are a super user, first of all, direct link, I may be able to, if I'm sharing that with another Content Hub user and it's not a public link, but I just want to provide them a direct link to be able to review it, I can use that direct link feature. And then direct publish, if I go to the create page with my super user, if I didn't want to go through that that kind of that flow of someone reviewing it and someone approving it, as a super user, I'm able to direct publish that asset, and we're able to, for certain user groups, where appropriate, we can give those permissions. Okay, so annotations. If we go to our asset or any given asset, you can kind of see the annotation functionality. Where if I go up here, bear with me, I can annotate that that asset. Where I can, I can draw on it if I want. I can, do whatever I want. And obviously, you might want to restrict that, and only certain people are able to do that. So that kind of brings us to the end of some basic features that I'm gonna look at the user group policies for, and then we've also covered, I think, these create review pages, the submit, approve, and reject, and the lifecycle statuses that surround that. But before I go into demoing the user group policies, it really highlights the importance of when you're building out your pages. So for anyone not familiar, Content Hub has a concept where you're actually building the UI for the DAM. And I think as a site developer, it's really hard to get your head around the concept of value of the DAM, because you're basically building a commerce search experience for the assets in the DAM. And the importance there is that people only have sort of access to what they need, but what they need is really accessible for them. So this is where we're able to, on any given page, if we want a page to inherit from the parent, we can go to, so say for example, if I want on the content page children's of that, and that or children of that, and that is the CMP page. Sorry, bear with us. So if I essentially make a page underneath content, which would show up on this this drop down in the navigation here, if I make that inherit security, then essentially if someone's got access to the parent page, they will have access to that child page. So if you want different configuration for all of these pages, then you need them to not inherit security from the content page that the users will have access to. And then you can, at a granular level, configure whether they've got access or not. Okay, and then additionally, we've got when you're configuring your member structure, the concept of a secured member, and a secured member, unless someone's given access to that, they won't be able to see it, let alone edit it. Okay, and then finally, I'll just quickly show the kind of secured member. So if I go to any given member and edit that, then in the advanced tab, there should be a secured option there. Okay, so then finally the diagnostics page. So if you're really struggling with your user groups, you can go to a given page, take a user that has the permissions you want, and by going to the security diagnostics page, you can then see, and if I just take as an example one of these asset detail pages, you can effectively give the ID of the page, and then you'll be able to see from the security diagnostics what permissions that user has. And I think that's a really useful way if you're kind of debugging issues. You're then able to see, look, what is it that's actually giving that person the permissions in that way. So you can see here I've got this user's got sort of create, read, order, download original, and you can see the user group that is coming from. Okay, so that being said, I'm going to go into the and try and configure our user for some of these things. So if I go into users, and if I go to my user groups, I've excuse me, I've already partially configured subfrance A, so I'm going to look at subfrance B, which is empty. And so what you can see here is this is where you're going to configure your rules. The member security, things that have got secured enabled, members that have got secured on enabled will show in here, and you can at a kind of granular level, you can then give them kind of read write access as desired. There's also the concept of privileges. So privileges can be really important things like export to Excel needs the export to Excel privilege. There's things like publishing collections needs the publish collections privilege. Various other things, impersonating a user that we're about to do also needs the impersonate privilege. If you want to be able to use the state machine that's in CMP, needs the enable state machine, and various other things that the documentation, similar to what Jesper was saying about Sitecore Search, the Sitecore Content Hub documentation is very good. The only thing I would say is because it is very good, it can be quite hard to sift through it and find exactly what you're looking for, and just because it's so comprehensive. Okay, so excuse me, I'm going to start with my my user, and bearing in mind there is a positive permissions model in Content Hub, and what that means is for kind of Sitecore developers, you may sort of be used to the workflows where you can deny someone something. In Content Hub, it's purely positive. There is no concept of denying. You're actively giving people permission for what they can do. And so in that regard, we need to, if I search for portal.page, we need to explicitly give users read access to any page we want. So you'll see when we go and impersonate this subfrance B user, none of these pages will show. And what I need to do is basically add a condition here for portal page. Oh, sorry. Portal page. And then I'm able to select the pages that I want to give the user permissions for. So say, for example, I want to give them permissions for the, that's not the right one, bear with me. Where are we? Assets I'm looking for. Okay, so I'm going to explicitly give them permissions for the assets page, for the collections page, and for that will do for now. So if I save that, then what you'll see is when we go and impersonate our Sitecore user B. Okay. And if I go down to users, and I've got a user that is using this Sitecore user group B user group. So if I come through here and just double check, yeah, we're able to then impersonate that user. So you can kind of instantly see all I've got is the pages that I've configured. And if I go through to the asset search page, I don't have read permissions to the asset, so I can't see anything there. So in that way, I'm able, if I go back to my, where are we? If I go back to my user groups, I can then add a new rule, and that will be for m.asset, and I'll also do m.file. And as I mentioned previously, there's the concept of m.asset being the asset and m.file being the file behind it. Okay, and then I'm going to give, if I give them read permissions, they'll be able to read it on any page. So if I'm happy with that, then I can save that. And what we should see when I go back to my assets page is now the user can see all of the assets. So that's fine. But if I'm a basic user, I might want them to do more than that, even on a basic user. So going back to my portal page configuration, I'm going to give them access to the create page and the review page. So bear with me. I'm going to select both of those. Great. And review. Okay. And I've given them read access. So if I save that, in theory, they should be able to see that if I go back to my my user here. And it's just worth bearing in mind that the navigation is cached. Sometimes the policies are cached. So I can go through to the create page and I know it's there, and it's cached per page. So suddenly in my navigation I can see those create and review pages. But if I go back to the sort of assets page, it's cached on there. And so what you kind of often need to remember to do is to clear the various caches. And so I'm going to just clear the navigation and the pages and the policies. And then when I go back, I'm expecting, even on this assets page, the navigation should update. Okay, so that user's got permissions to those pages, but there's nothing in there and it can't create them. So if we go back to our user group now, there we go. And so in fact, now what I'm going to do is give them permissions to create, because on the create page, then they should be able to create. So if I go back to my user here and refresh, I should hopefully get the option to add. And if I upload a file, I should be able to go for that one again. Okay, and so you can see there I'm able to create, but that's fine, but I'm not actually able to go to the asset detail page. I'm not actually able to edit even I could. So again, you can kind of see this repeated concept. I need to give them permissions to the asset detail page. So if I go and select that asset detail, I think it's like that. Okay, let's just do detail. Okay. Okay, I think that's right. Asset details. Okay, and then what I'm also going to do is give them permissions on m.asset, and I will make it such that in a given life cycle status, they have also got update permissions. So if you think about that, they've got read and create permissions on all the assets, but I only want them to be able to edit assets. First of all, if they were created by themselves, and then second of all, I'm going to make it that life cycle. Oh, sorry, life cycle. I'm going to make it m.final life cycle status. I'm going to make it so they can only edit their own assets if they were either rejected after approval or created after they've uploaded them. And if I give them update permissions here and save, what should now be the case is if I refresh this page, they should now have access to the asset detail page. But additionally to that, they're able to edit the asset and essentially do what they need to do. But then they can't submit it for approval. So again, I'm going to update their policy so that I'm going to give them that submit permission. And then if I go back here and refresh, I'm expecting this time, hopefully, submit for approval. Okay, and so in which case it's going to go out of the create page and it should turn up in the review page. But this user now, because I've only given him or them permissions for the particular life cycle, they shouldn't then be able to edit it for review, and equally they can't approve. But if I add a rule for m.asset and essentially in a similar way, I can say, okay, if that life cycle is under review, where are we? Final life cycle status, under review, and then I'm going to give them approve rights. And let's give them update as well. So in that case, if I be able to approve or reject, and so if I approve that, then it's going to come through to the asset search page. And you may also have a concept I think I touched on before about this digital rights management. And so essentially, if you've restricted an asset, you may say, well, I don't want you to do any of that on a restricted asset, or I don't want you to even be able to see restricted asset. And in which case, what we're able to do is add a condition here where we effectively say restricted, restricted, no. And in which case, this kind of read permission, I mean, it's not going to apply on the create permission anyway, but essentially we're making it so they won't even be able to see restricted assets. Okay, so in the interest of time, because I think I'm coming up to time, the additional things to kind of think about are I spoke about the collections page and these sort of out of the box permissions on the collections page. So bear with me. Here we go. So I personally would advocate for letting the collections permissions work out of the box, because you can see on this documentation here that out of the box, if you're sharing a collection with someone, so I think this is my super user, if I'm going to share a collection with someone, I can actually give them those permissions. So if I want to, if I say my SUG user, I might say, right, I'm going to give you reader access, contributor, or manager. And if you want to manage that through user group policies and not respect the out of the box almost capabilities of that, you can achieve that. And basically what you'd need to do is actually go to the configuration of the page, and let's quickly go and have a look. So where are we? On the collections page. Is it me? Okay. So on the collections page, if I click here, long story short, you can remove those permissions. So I believe on the selection component, and I'd have to customize it. Might be the creation component. Okay, it's not there. And the creation component. Bear with me. I think it's actually on the child. But without killing the demo, basically, if you remove those roles, then it essentially achieves where it will respect the user group policies. I'll just give this one final one. And in fact, it is in the tabs component, I believe. Okay, this creation component. Okay, so you can see here where these roles here, if I remove collection contributor and I remove collection manager, then essentially it will start respecting the user group policies. So hopefully in a sort of very brief demo, it gives a bit of an oversight of how we're able to configure various things. If you want to go and configure things like enabling people to create public links, there's several facets of that. So just to quickly cover that as an example, if I wanted to give someone the ability to create public links, I can go to masset, and where was my restricted, and I can, giving them the ability to read and create public links, it isn't sufficient by itself for them to create public links. So you'll also have to go, and this is a similar concept with several other things. You'll also have to have mPublic link and give them the permissions that you want them to have. So create, update, read, if you want them to, depending what you want to do. And this is going back to that concept where you might want people to be able to read the links, but you might not want them to be able to create them, and you might not want them to be able to update them or delete them. And so you can kind of see there a bit of a flavor of how these things can be achieved. And the same applies to all of the lists that I kind of went through. I think it's a very time-consuming exercise, so I'd very much promote, if you're kind of tasked with this in a complex scale, it's worth attributing and estimating significant time for it. And equally, you're able to kind of layer up different user groups. So it says in the best practices that first of all you shouldn't duplicate rules. So in theory, you should have different levels, and someone who's the top user should have all of those levels. Someone who's the medium user just have maybe a couple of them, and the basic user just has the lowest level. But then that being the case, you shouldn't have more than 10. So there's kind of a bit of strategizing around those best practices. And then just to quickly summarize an example of how it can get really complex when you may have a restricted asset and you say, I don't want people to download restricted assets, but they're still able to download all of the renditions potentially. And you can see here some of the complex configuration where, the PDF, for example, to download the PDF, it requires view not watermark permission, but it doesn't respect download preview or download original. And the metadata, for example, there's no way to stop people downloading metadata. It doesn't require any of these permissions. The original, going back to the sort of policy, you can see like some of these options, whether that view not watermarked, whether that is download original, download preview, direct publish, various other things, archive. All of this is configurable, and in that regard, it's, I think, very powerful, just very time consuming. And on that note of consuming time, I think my time's probably up. So I will hand back over and stop sharing in case there's any questions, if there's time.
Hopefully you can see a robot.
I can see it.
Yeah, super. Okay, so thank you for having me, and thank you to the other speakers. So I'm going to talk about how to integrate generative AI into Sitecore. It says Sitecore XM Cloud. Actually, I'm just using regular Sitecore, but I think it will work on both platforms. So quick about me. My name is Kristoffer, and I'm a senior software engineer, and I'm located in Denmark, which means that I speak Danish. And of course, we also have people here speaking other languages than French, also than English, which I think will be important in a minute when we'll talk about the language models. You can see here on my slide my LinkedIn and my blog, and everything I'm going to show today you can download from my GitHub. I will spam you later on with addresses to the different versions I have of this tool I'm building. So, quick overview of the topics on this section on this session. First, I'm going to introduce my integration, which I call Sitecore Suggest because it had to have a name. Then I am going to talk about some practical details. Actually, they're not that practical; they are really technical. But we will only look at the stuff, the technical stuff that we kind of need to know to integrate against the OpenAI endpoints. Then I will go to look at two different endpoints. I'm going to start with looking at an endpoint called the completion endpoints. It is a simpler endpoint than the one we used to know OpenAI for, which is the ChatGPT, but it's kind of a predecessor. And then I'm going to end with looking at the chat endpoint, the ChatGPT. So, okay, Sitecore Suggest. This is my implementation. I started playing around with how you could integrate it. I had a site. I needed to generate a lot of text for it, like test content. And I didn't want to use lorem ipsum text, so I thought, well, let's make an integration. And what it does, you can download it from my GitHub. The address was here. It's simply a package you install in Sitecore, and it will add under review a button called Suggest. And if you click that, here you can see I am on a page about Saturn, the planet. If you click that, you will get this modal up, and you can see here it's basically interfacing against ChatGPT, so you can ask it to write about something. You can also select one of the fields you already have. So in this case, I could select the title field, which I have down here, the title Saturn. Just select it up here, and it will ask ChatGPT to write a summary about Saturn. I can do some configurations here, and then I will get my suggestions down here, which I can put into a field. I can select a field down here. So now comes before we'll look down into the code and how this actually works and the endpoints, here comes a few practical details. And it's important to notice I'm not an expert on ChatGPT or the language model, but I will try to give an introduction as best as I can so we kind of know what we're dealing with here. First of all, some keywords. OpenAI, it's a company, and I think we all heard about it in the news last week because there's a lot of trouble on their board. And then we have the concept of GPT, which stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. It's a type of language model, and it is the models that OpenAI is building. A language model is fundamentally a predictor, so it can, based on a string of words, it can predict the next words. And they have kind of two families of GPT models. They have what they sometimes refer to as the instruct models or the completion models. They are models that has been optimized to get a single instruction and response with a single reply. And that kind of morphed into the chat models, which they are pushing right now. So right now, a lot of focus is going into the chat model. They are optimized for what they call multi-turn chat. It's basically having a conversation. So the instructor APIs was kind of earlier models, and they are also more direct in their responses. So they will never, for example, give you a response that you can ask me more. They will just take an instruction and give an answer. So we will start by looking at tokens, which is also a really important concept. And I took this. So when you put a text into some of the OpenAI models, you will it will tokenize it. So it will basically split up the text into to multiple parts, and it does that based on a database. So it basically have a huge database of all the words that they have kind of indexed, and they will take the text and split it up. And because they are an English company, they will they tend to know more English words. So I tried to put in this sentence in both English and French and Latin and Danish, and you will notice something immediately, that the number of words differs a lot between the different language. So English is generally a really word-rich language, where a language like Danish, for example, has a lot of what we call inflection, which basically means we merge words together. But you will also see that when I come to, for example, the Danish text and the Latin text, and also to a certain extent the French text, you will see that it tokenizes smaller tokens. And that's basically because it's not trained on so much Danish words. So there's a lot of complete Danish words it doesn't know. Whereas you can see in the English text, it's basically know every word in English. So it knows about 50,000 words. And when it does this, it assigns a number to each token. So and you can see here I put in a sentence the hat, and you can see hat, the token for hat is always the same. You can see I get the same number here. So that leads to something we should be aware of. Without access to the database over tokens, we cannot actually replicate the counting of tokens locally. So that's kind of a problem, and that differs a lot from, for example, if you are tokenizing programming language, where you can often do it with a regex expression. And it's especially important because a lot of the models that are currently out there has really strict token limits. So the one I am using is the ChatGPT 3 equivalent to ChatGPT 3 instruct model, and it has a token limit of 4,000. And that's about, for English text, that would be about a page of text. But for a language like English, where there's way more tokens in the text, the size of the text will decrease. And you can see the cost is also measured in tokens. So now you know a lot of the newer models have way higher token limits, which we will benefit from, especially when we talk languages like Danish. Okay. So locally, I need to make sure that I don't hit the token limitations when outputting text into the OpenAI. If I send a too long text into it, I'll get an error. So right now, I'm simply using I'm counting the words and saying, well, one word is about 3 tokens. That's kind of the average in Danish. Of course, if you have English, it's way lower. You can also try to use some of the libraries. There's a good library on Python called TickToken. There is 2 libraries on C#. I haven't actually tried them. I don't think they are 100% accurate, but it's worth giving a shot. And we will quickly look at a sample request here. So this is a request to the completion endpoints. And it's there's a few things we should notice here. I steer the language by entering a request in the correct language. So there isn't a property where I can set the response language. So I input a prompt in French and I get a French reply. We will also notice a temperature parameter. It is, so remember I said that a language model is it predicts texts. So each time it has a string of words or tokens, it will get some predictions for the next tokens to put into the sentence. And of course, some of these predictions will have a high probability, and some of them will have a low probability. It will never just choose the most probable, because then it will get into loops where it will repeat the same tokens again and again. So it will choose from the most probable. But if you increase the temperature, it's just called temperature. There is probably some physics logic behind it. I don't know, but you will increase more unlikely tokens. So you'll basically average out the probabilities for the different tokens, which, I mean, I call it creativity. It tends to put in more unpredictable text. This was the practical or technical details. Now we will look at how I use it in Sitecore Suggest. So it will be easier from now, hopefully. So Sitecore Suggest 0.1. That was my first version of it, and you can download from my GitHub. And it's really, really simple. So you have a prompt here, and you can say, write something about the planet Saturn. And you select how long it should be. And again, there isn't a way you can control the text length other than put it into the prompt. So what happens here is, behind the scenes, it's basically adding a postfix to your prompt saying, write something about the planet Saturn, use about 700 words. And then I click generate, and it will make this request to the completion endpoint. And you can see here the complete prompt here, write something about the planet Saturn, use about 700 words. I am setting the max tokens. You can see here I have subtracted some tokens to account for this text, because if I set this to the max, so it will fail, because it will say, well, you don't have enough tokens. But after that, I get a response back. Super simple response. I get text here. I have cut out the last part of the text here. And I get some, I haven't asked for probabilities. There's a lot of details here, but you can see here the token consumption. It says, well, you have inputted 12 tokens, and I created about 1,000 tokens for you, so you're going to pay for 1,000 tokens. Okay. So that's super nice, and I get a nice text about Saturn here, which I select to put into my text field, and click replace, replacing whatever text there is there already. And now I have a fine text about Saturn, and that was kind of what I set out to do, so I can create test content really fast. But I became more interested in how I could do this in a better way. So I'm currently developing 0.2 version of it, and that kind of has the capability of creating context-aware suggestions. So what is a context-aware suggestion in my vocabulary? So on my pages, I have a field for description and I have a field for keywords. So obviously, I could put in prompts saying write keywords for Saturn, or write a short description about Saturn. That would kind of work, but it actually doesn't take the context of the page. So I want the GPT model to know what I have in the fields on the page already, and of course also the fields of any module that like data sources I have on modules I've set in as renderings. So there is a new button, use chat model and include context, and that does exactly what it says. It I can now click, so you can see here I have written in a prompt saying write a short list of keywords separated by commas. It doesn't know anywhere here that I'm talking about Sitecore, about Saturn. But when I click generate, I get a nice list of keywords about Saturn. So how does that work? So remember, I said that the chat endpoint is optimized for multi-turn chat, which basically responds reply. It's actually a stateless endpoint. And that means that each time you call the endpoint, you send the entire chat history, or up to what you have tokens to it. That's the only way it actually knows what we are talking about. So what you would normally see in like a conversation is that you would have user message. Those are the one I input. And then you would have assistant message. Those are the responses it replies. And then you would basically have the entire chat history. But there is also a kind of message you can put in that is called a system message, where you can tell it something about the context. So they have examples where they are configuring the chat robot to be like, you should talk to people of this age or whatever. But I'm actually simply putting in my context. So I looped through all the fields, obviously only text fields and rich text fields, adding them here up to my token limit, so which I estimate, and that's also why it's important to know how many tokens you have. And then when I get the response here, I get a response and it says, well, I have some keywords for you. Here you go. And it appears to know that we are actually talking about Saturn. So let me see if I can go with it. Obviously, there will be a version 3. So version 2 is already out there, and you can download from a GitHub and try it out. So they are obviously pushing it a lot. ChatGPT 4 is out, and it has a lot of different capabilities. So the next thing I'm going to try is to include images in the context. So you can send images as part as your chat and get it to, for example, describe an image or add metadata to an image. Probably also, so this constructing a chat history based on the context of my page is not so. All of these endpoints are really cheap when you don't expose them to end users, like in a chatbot, but only to editors. So I have spent right now. I've spent $1 on it, playing around total. But of course, we are generating a lot of context, and there is other ways to do it where you can include embeddings instead, which I try to experiment with. So that's what I've been working with, and thank you very much. And is there any questions? I hope you found it interesting.
Wow, that was really insightful, especially in a hot topic like, Sitecore AI. I think we have a question, but yeah, it was for Peter.
Oh, I will move myself.
So Peter, if you
So
have
you kind
already,
of answered it, I think. Sorry,
so I think you're already chatting with. Yeah. So it's from Peter. I think I can just post it here. So
yeah,
Kristoffer, you can just see that. But for the audience, let me just read it out. So the question from Peter is like, what is the pricing like for the APIs? Any concerns if there are lots of content editors and lots of content that it could result in a big surprise cost?
Yeah. So as I said, when I let me go to the pricing page. I hope you can still see my slides. So when I started out on this, you can have a subscription on OpenAI where you insert money and it doesn't withdraw automatically. I did that for $10, and I haven't spent a dollar yet. So obviously it's not like super expensive, but that's just me. But if we try to do the math, I don't think the short answer is no. I don't think it's expensive unless you expose it to end users. So if you build a chatbot that is on your page and you allow everybody to just chat away, it will be expensive. But in these cases, I don't think so. So if we take English, right, it's about for a page of text, it's about 4,000 tokens. If you take like the average, so the cost for our page would be $0.006, if I can do my math correct. So that's not a lot to pay for generating a page of text, I believe. And also, it's worth noting that it's. I know we are really over time. They are actually switching strategy a little bit. So they're the earlier model. So this one, the Text DaVinci model, which was the one I used before, it was, you can see it's basically a tenth of the price from that. And I was like, that's actually curious. Why has it become so much cheaper when they upgrade? And it's because they have started something they call human reinforced learning, where they have some humans that sit and evaluate the responses to train the models. And that means that the models themselves, with this added a layer of training, can be simpler. So when the model is done and they put it out, they don't use that much computer power. There you can go read on their homepage about it. It's actually really interesting.
Nice. Yes, I think the OpenAI being used in lots of cases, I think.
Yeah.
Writing up the contents might be one of the best use cases. And also, you spoke about the languages. It can also still, create contents with different languages, I guess.
Yeah. It's actually, I mean, I don't know in other languages. I was, of course, skeptical in Danish because there are 5 million native speakers. So it must be a small language. And it seems to be fine. I mean, I cannot see. So obviously, it's not as refined as in English, but it's definitely usable.
And yeah, thank you. I think we are over time.
Yeah.
So
sorry.
So that's And this one, it was a great session, and thank you so much to the speakers for having spent your time on this and preparing these wonderful topics for us. And it's always great to go through all the hot topics like the OpenAI and other stuff. And once again, thank you all, and hope to meet you in the next SUG France session. And yes, hopefully start of next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye bye.